Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal production channel here at YouTube. Welcome to another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 39. And today's album, well, does it even need any introduction? This album, of course, was being celebrated by, of course, throughout the whole entire week, basically, by its own very iconic band this past Saturday. This, of course, is AC/DC's sixth studio album, of course, fifth studio album here in the U.S., because this band, of course, at this point had 5 studio albums released in Australia, which, of course, counting the very first 2 albums, which were, of course, High Voltage and TNT. The album that was released, of course, here in the U.S. was titled High Voltage, but it was a compilation of the 2 albums anyways. But, again, this was pretty much their 6th studio album here in Australia, and, of course, it's Highway to Hell. Pretty much the album that put the band basically on map here in the U.S., even though they kind of saw some moderate success with them, such as Let There Be Rock, and I think even to an extent Power Edge almost. And of course, the live album, If You Want Blood, You've Got It. But it's Highway to Hell. The album Dirty Deeds wasn't even released here in the U.S. It was only released in Europe only. But this is the album that basically put them on the map, especially for those that definitely wanted to get an idea of, especially a vocalist like Bon Scott, and especially the antics of Angus Young and the whole entire band, including Malcolm, the late Malcolm Young, and of course, Phil Rudd and Cliff Williams, who of course at this point was still kind of new to the band, only debuting on Power Edge, and of course the live albums. So Highway to Hell was a second album with them. Of course, Cliff Williams, of course, replaced original bass player Mark Evans, who was with the band at least from TNT to Let There Be Rock. So with all the talking here, let's definitely get right into it. This album, of course, before we get to the music on this album, which in a way, if you want a definition, or at least for those that want a good definition of AC/DC, or at least a good idea of what these guys were about, definitely back in the 1970s, anybody will also point to albums such as maybe Dirty Deeds, High Voltage. Of course, they're talking about the U.S. version, basically, and not the Australian version, or Let There Be Rock, or Power Edge. They might point them to there, but if you want a good idea, this album, of course, they're always going to point you to. They're always going to point you to Highway to Hell. So before we get to that music, let's get into also the various different versions of this, which are only 2 versions, and the basically is for the artwork. Because over in Australia, they got the version that's got, it's pretty much the same photo shot that we see on pretty much on most of the common copies of this album, but over in Australia, it's instead being engulfed with flames, basically, all fiery and everything. It's basically just more sketched over. Mostly the photo is kind of sketched to it, but it's all flames and everything, and you kind of do see it on the back of the booklet for a lot of the 2003 reissues of this album, the Digipack reissues. So you kind of get the idea of what the Australian version looks like, and that's the one I kind of prefer. But still, growing up, the US, the version that's just again the plain photo of them, is still pretty iconic to me, and it brings me back to the time when I was a kid growing up, getting into music, and AC/DC was the band that definitely geared me towards the heavier kind of stuff, or just the hard and heavy bands and all of that kind of music. So I pretty much wanted this kind of stuff. This was what I wanted, basically, was something like AC/DC or something like Judas Priest or Motorhead, except and any of the band that I can name off the top of my head that at least had a really good, rich, real razor sharp hard rock, so almost heavy metal sound. Bands like AC/DC definitely were ones that fit into that mold, and of course, I played the hell out of this album. So it's, I guess, finally time to get in to the music on this. And do I have to even go into any description, even though I know you're probably going to get some dumbass in here that's going to say every album sounds the same, but that's only somebody who's probably heard one or two albums and completely says everything. But still, this album, of course, is the first one also for producer Robert Mutt Lang, who, of course, from here will only produce, of course, other albums like Back in Black and For Those About to Rock for AC/DC. And, of course, he's been producing albums for Def Leppard. He's pretty much the reason for why Def Leppard are pretty much this big, pop band. And, of course, also producing Foreigners 4. So this is the album that introduced him to the real hard rock crowd, and he basically gave him a really good slick production. Even though the tone of some of the album isn't really far off from what you're getting earlier with albums such as, of course, TNT, Dirty Deeds, Let There Be Rock, and, of course, Powerage. It doesn't completely stray away from that, but it definitely, for sure, honed in even more on that type of writing and was even more tightened, I guess you can say, a lot more tightened in. But if we get into some of the songs, we all know, of course, this whole album also kind of plays out as a greatest hits album, in a way. Because I think at this point, everybody pretty much knows Highway to Hell. Everyone knows Girls Got Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Beating Around the Bush, Shot Down in Flames. Get It Hot and Love Hungry Man, I think, are probably the more deeper cuts off this one. But of course, you got the song If You Want Blood, You've Got It, which of course is named right after the live album that was released in the middle of this in Powerage. And then, of course, Night Prowler. And I guess we can get into the reason why this song is probably, let's just say, infamous. Of course, before I get into what I'm about to get into, well, at the end of the song, we're like at the very end of the song, like before it completely ends, Bon Scott ends up quoting the late Robin Williams from the TV show Mork and Mindy. But the thing that makes this song more notorious is for the fact that it's connected to the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez stuff, the serial killer. It's pretty much, it ends up connecting with it and kind of giving the song making it more dangerous, I guess. Which of course kind of gave it's enough that the band was already dealing, especially with this album and maybe also with Let There Be Rock. Was it satanic? Because for Let There Be Rock, it's got the song Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. Even though it's not about Satan, it's about a stripper. Again, a song that's more so, again, dealing with sex. But the song Night Prowler ended up kind of giving them more of a, even more dangerous, that's even at times almost beyond Satanism, and that's more so, even though, yeah, we know Rich Ramirez had the pentagram, wasn't on his right or left hand, but it's more so for the fact that he stalked his victims. That's not, though, what the song is about. Again, it's a song that, just like, though, on a different subject of sex. But it deals with more sexual kind of themes than, again, about killing. And the same thing goes for, again, probably the biggest elephant on the album, of course, Highway to Hell. The song that, of course, ended up, giving the band a satanic edge, even though the song isn't about hell, it's basically used as like a metaphor for touring. Basically, jet lag or whatever, because it's more so about the hard work of touring. And also the one thing that these Christians or some of these evangelical ones just love to harp about is about the line, hey Satan, I paid my dues. No, that's more so about gas. Yes, can you put that together? Because of if you looked at the timeline of like 1970s, especially 1979, gas prices even at that time were considered high, and especially over in Europe, especially Australia, they probably to them were like whatever price it was, even though now it's probably cheap compared to the prices these days. And I don't want to go into that kind of crap right now, but still, that's what it's a metaphor for. It's for gas money, you fucking morons. I'm sorry to go on a little bit of rant there, but every time I hear everyone that completely shames a track because of it has the song Hell in it, even though they can't look into it and actually think for that some of these words are used as metaphors. So, yeah, I went a little bit of a rant there, even though it's a classic track, but because of this sound, it also has that sort of, again, that luring of satanic or whatever, even though it's just them not looking at the actual meanings behind the songs. It has nothing to do with this Illuminati crap, it has nothing to do with Satan, it has nothing to do with it. How about you kind of get that at least out of your throats for once? And look at it in a much more different standpoint instead of trying to bring religion and force it into it. I'm nothing against people of religion. There are again, I've got VC members that are Christians and so on, and again, love the hard rock heavy metal genre. Even they at least understand that some of the lyrics aren't completely what some of these big time or some of these evangelical Christians or so are trying to conceive that they are. So, sorry I completely almost hindered half this video basically, or this spotlight on that little subject, but it's almost difficult when speaking of such an iconic album that put the band basically on the map of especially the hard rock and at the time early metal, mountain and everything. You can't help but bring up the sort of that satanic panic stuff that this album ended up also bringing in a bit, basically. But still, I think everyone's every time, especially for some of these fake Christian conspiracy theorists here on YouTube that still want to kind of keep the illusion that it's all the Illuminati and everything, completely makes me sick in a way. And I know it's probably not supposed to be taken seriously, some of those channels, but it just completely makes me sick and how some people actually buy into it. I don't believe 1 second into some of that. I think all of that is complete hoogie boogie cookie fucking garbage. Nothing has nothing to do with it. I think some people just need to drop it for once. Just fucking drop it. There really isn't that big of a goddamn conspiracy here in the freaking music business and Satanism. There isn't. There's not once of it. Get over it. Stop trying to make up some sort of illusion that isn't even there. There's nothing there. Stop creating it. Anyways, I need to kind of keep myself before I go into something because of that stuff. Just it grates on my nerves. Anyways, again, classic record, classic album. This sadly would though be the very last album for Bon Scott, because on February 19th of 1980, Bon Scott would sadly pass away due to, this was pretty much said alcohol poisoning, even though apparently they say he choked on his own vomit. But again, he died in his car at the times. I'm not going to go on to, again, whatever conspiracy theory is there, because I don't want to try and hinder some of this video a bit. But still, sadly, we lost Bon Scott at a pretty young age. Was already going to be seeing some big success, of course, with this album. After the sad death of Bon Scott, AC/DC would pick themselves right back up and find a new singer, even though there was a whole list of guys. They were looking at either singer from, I think at one point even Moxie's singer Buzz Sherman at one point was considered for AC/DC. I know that even the singer for the Australian band Heaven, who of course is no longer with us as well, besides Buzz Sherman, was also looked as a possible replacement. And there's been plenty of them. Anything at one point, even maybe at one point, Angry Anderson from Rose Tattoo, I think, was almost thought of at one point. I know that there was also plenty of auditioning tapes, but they end up finding former Geordie singer Brian Johnson, and history was pretty much made. So, and of course, at some point, I will go into some of those albums as well. So, until then, just keep celebrating definitely a classic album within AC/DC's catalog. That, of course, is Highway to Hell, an album that definitely, for sure, brings back a lot of memories, and it's still an album that I do listen to from here and every now and then, because especially when I'm in a mood for AC/DC, any of the Bon Scott era albums, or even some of the Brian Johnson era albums, I'm always going to pull out because of there really isn't like there really isn't a bad AC/DC album at all. I know some will say there are, but that's just their preference. My preference, there isn't really a bad one. Some better, or some just not nearly as good, but even still, whenever I'm on a kick, a AC/DC kick, I'm going to end up going into those albums as well, and I'm still going to enjoy them. So you either take it or leave it. So, with that, this video has definitely gone quite a bit. So, until then, I hope you all enjoyed. If you've definitely, and I know, I don't even have to say whether or not. You know that you're probably going to comment anyways and give your thoughts, and I'm always thankful for that. So, and for those who haven't, you've been living under a rock, okay? You've been living under a rock. With that, hope you all enjoyed. This is Harry Thrasher Sam out. I'll see you all later.